Do you want a financially secure future, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones as well? This is Generations of Wealth, the podcast that breaks down the most effective wealth building strategies you can easily apply to your own life. Join investor and international best-selling author Derek Dombeck in exploring practical tips and sound advice on building a profitable business, creating a powerful brand, or getting into the thriving world of real estate investing. This is your chance to create your very own financial roadmap to live your vision, love your life. Let's begin this discussion with your host, Derek Dombeck.
Welcome to the Generations of Wealth podcast. I am your host, Derek Dombeck, and this is the show where we talk about all things that help you live your vision, love your life. Today, we are going to have a guest named Damion Lupo, and I started seeing Damion at events probably 5 years ago, got to know him a little bit, and we haven't crossed paths in person for a while, but this man's got a ton of experience. He's been to hell and back, actually, which is the perfect guest for our show. Before we bring Damion on, though, again, I'd love to take the second just to give my appreciation to all of you listeners that come back every episode. Anything you can do to help us grow the Generations of Wealth family. And that includes jumping on the Generations of Wealth Facebook page, getting interactive with that. You know, if you want to get involved with some of our events that we put on, all of that information is at thegenerationsofwealth.com. And again, just a sincere thank you for being here. So with that, let's bring on Damion Lupo. And as promised, Mr. Damion Lupo. Damion, thank you so much for coming on the Generations of Wealth podcast.
Derek, it's good to see you, man. It's been a long time since we crossed paths, but it's good to be back in the same place.
Absolutely. I know. Yeah, you're right. It's been probably 2-3 years. We used to see each other at different events, but I still have your book on my bookshelf. Actually, before we were starting recording, I had to kind of throw it up, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. But you've got some incredible material that you've published over the years. But let's just start the beginning. Who are you? And tell the audience a little bit about Damion Lupo.
Who am I? I'm a serial entrepreneur that went out and got thrown out of college because I was starting businesses that actually put the bookstore out of business in college because I thought they were ripping everybody off. And so I tried to do better, and I did, and put them out of business, paid for school in a week, and went off and started doing some real estate instead of getting a 9-to-5 job because it seemed like a better fit. And that's what I did for 6, 7, 8 years until my ego got 10 feet tall and I thought I was bulletproof, and lost $25 million in 2008 and went through this whole process of reimagining and reinventing my life. And then on the other side of that, just really found that the answer wasn't about more money as I thought it was for the first 10 years. It was really about more impact and more service to other people. And the money was really needing to be a side effect instead of the target. And so that was, it's an interesting thing to go through that process because I had to lose everything multiple times to really understand that. And people don't want to do this. They don't want to have to go through the process. They want to just get the money anyway and they say, well, we say it's, getting rich isn't going to solve your problems. And they say, well, I'm going to try it anyway. And so they all, people do this. And I did the same thing, even though mentors told me not to. So I kind of laugh at the whole process, but really the story is about that, trying and practicing the idea of money, hedonism and all that stuff. And then getting to the other side where it's really more about how many people's lives can I help by helping them become financially free.
Yeah, I mean, we have a similar path as far as 2008. And I say it publicly all the time. I didn't lose 25 million. I lost about a $4 million portfolio, but I say it all the time. It was the biggest blessing that I've ever had after we got through it. And that's what the Generations of Wealth show is all about, really. Because it's not about making all this money. It's about enjoying your life. Our mantra is live your vision, love your life. So, okay. So you lost it. Take us through the timeline a little bit. You lost it in 2008. What was your next steps?
Well, the next step was denial, which is, it's a funny phase of grief where you just pretend it didn't happen. And eventually there's a reality check and it's, okay, I'm actually homeless and I'm on fumes. I've got a few bucks that I squirreled away and it wasn't much, but basically I was toast. And so that process took a couple of years until I went to the next step, which was saying, okay, I need to figure out the problem. And the problem is me. Because I think a lot of times we point fingers. Like I was blaming Obama and I was blaming the Federal Reserve and I was blaming everybody. And when I really was able to start shifting was when I blamed myself and just said, hey, it was my fault, it's my responsibility. And then I can learn from it. And I spent a couple of years digging into that question that I asked, which is what is true? And what is true is that it wasn't about the money. It was actually about the money for me, but that life is not about the money, and that really I'm meant to teach and support people using my experiences, not some weekend seminar that I'm regurgitating, but really go out there, bleed in the trenches, and then share that with people. And then the money would end up being a side effect. That whole process of getting there took about 5 years from the time I lost it all in 2008. And it was at that time that I watched my parents retire and my dad ended up dying really broke. And it was interesting watching the experience with him because he had played by the rules. He'd done what he was supposed to do. And then a few weeks before he died, he sat down with me and we were talking and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. And I realized, and he realized he had no more time. And it was a sense of regret that he hadn't done life. And he was really always just doing what he was told. And I'm a big fan of going out there and not doing what you're told, going out there and doing the thing that changes the world. And so it was at that point that I said, I think I need to help people with their retirement money. And the reason was I saw him with his retirement money and it basically went to zero. And people just don't know what their options are. And they didn't really know how they could make that abundant. And most people were just trying not to run out of money before they ran out of life. And that became the mission to use that tool and that idea. And so that's where eQRP was born and the books were written. And it was all about that moment in time where I saw him in so much pain and I realized he's probably not the only one. There's probably millions of people in a very similar space.
Yeah, absolutely. We've never had this conversation before, privately or publicly, but we are on very parallel universes because my dad retired, got diagnosed with cancer 6 months later, and we buried him at age 64 and never got to enjoy retirement. Regardless if he had money or not, he never got to enjoy it. And it was in that same time frame as when we were losing everything. So it's crazy how a lot of people really have the same path and the same struggles, but we don't necessarily share that openly. Well, we do on this show, but most people don't share that openly. So
no, and I learned a lot about that, what you're talking about when in 2012, I wrote a book with a friend of mine called Reinvented Life. And it was the journey of the 2000s and building things up and then blowing it up and then really starting over and looking at the external and the internal transformation. And what was interesting is after I wrote the book, people came to me and said, man, I read Reinvented Life. I thought I was the only one that was going through that. And so my experience was very similar. I realized, wow, there's a lot of people. And it's one of the sad things about what's going on in society now. You have all this division and it's pulling us apart. And what people really need to stop and think about is we have way more in common than we do. Whether you have an opinion on one thing or another, some political, social issue, that's really, there's so much more that we have in common. And instead we tend to isolate ourselves, which is really unhealthy. And quite frankly, it's deadly. We're meant to be connected. And when we're not connected, people tend to die and they get sick. And I think it's really important for us to remember what you and I are talking about, everybody listening, that you're not alone. There are people that are out there that support you, that are going along those similar paths. And you're not meant to be in a silo.
No, and it is the society we're in today, which we could go off on a tangent for hours, but everybody wants to talk about the stuff that's interesting, right? The landlords aren't going to talk about the 95% of their tenants that are awesome. They're going to talk about the 5% that are, shitty and bring up all the drama. And it's the same thing that you just mentioned, right? People always tend to lean towards the negative. And I travel a lot, as do you. And, I live in the upper Midwest in Wisconsin where it's still pretty slow pace and people are very willing to help their neighbors. And then I travel to big cities and I see how, in a lot of cases, people won't even say hi to you. They won't even give you a head nod. And I don't understand it. That's not my background. My background is always to give somebody a helping hand, take somebody at their word. And I don't know how we change that in society. We're not going to change it on this show, but I sure would like to.
And I've thought a lot about this and wondering how I can participate, because I think there's ways to, like, people tend to look at the news, they tend to watch things and get mad about it. They get mad about the Federal Reserve. They get mad about what's going on politically, who's running for president. And the question I've been asking myself and I ask people is, well, what can you do about that? The answer is generally very little or nothing. What can you do about your economy, your world, like what you can impact? And how can you help society instead of bitching about it? And this is where, instead of trying to figure out how to get money and be mad about somebody raising taxes or doing something to you regulatorily, the question is, how can you go serve more people? The money will take care of itself. And when you serve more people, you inadvertently make society healthier, better, happier, freer. And so that's how I think that there is a solution for everybody. Ask the bigger question. We're here to tap into our potential to serve other people, and other people, the planet. Like there's a reason we're here. When you get obsessed about that, it really does change your energy, your life, and your fulfillment, instead of chasing this elusive success pile of money, which never makes you really happy, except for that moment you get it and then you're like, oh, now what? I guess I need a bigger pile. And the alternative is we start finding deeper meaning, and that's, to me, that is the answer. It's finding that meaning where you're serving other people, and it becomes external versus internal.
I get this question a lot, and I'm sure you have over the years too, right? People, you buy a house or a piece of real estate, commercial, whatever, and you sell it, and you're like, yeah, but now you got to pay taxes, and they're so focused on the negative. Well, okay, I just made $100,000 and I got to pay taxes on it, but I still get to keep the lion's share, versus sitting in the chair watching TV, bitching and making zero. But, oh, at least I didn't have to pay taxes. Well, that's just stupid. But that's the mentality, right? So anyways, I do want to move on, because I'll go off on a tangent, and my listeners know that about me. But so talk a little bit about eQRP. And then I know you've got something else really awesome going on called Frame Tech, and I don't want to gloss over that. So
yeah, it's, what's interesting on the other side of all this, this mess, if you will, and this gift of getting squashed by the universe for a moment. And I mean, getting squashed, I've literally had that happen multiple times. For example, I went skydiving 4 times, had 3 jumps fail, had problems 3 different times, used a reserve chute, and the space shuttle exploded over me on my last jump. So the universe has given me messages that I sometimes don't acknowledge. I also don't recommend going skydiving with me. I won't do it again, but I'm not somebody you should invite. But the interesting thing after that gift of the meltdown and the homelessness and everything, when I saw this thing that was happening, like the universe gives us these opportunities, and if we're open, awake, we'll see them. And so I said, you know what, there's an opportunity, because the market doesn't realize, in general, people don't know that they can take their retirement money, their IRAs and 401ks, and do anything other than just having them in mutual funds. Maybe they get a self-directed where they can invest in stocks. And there's all these really cool things out there, like real estate investments, like private companies, Bitcoin and gold, like all these cool things that are not Wall Street. And so I said, well, you know what? I think it's my job to go empower people with the right information, at least the full information. And so eQRP became this idea, this mission to free 1 million people from financial their shackles, breaking those shackles and the bondage that's with them. And it was empowering people to get a hold of their money, their retirement money, and then use it for things outside of the Wall Street stuff. That's what it has been the last almost 12, actually a decade. It's been doing this for a decade. And it's created a community of thousands of people that are now working together inside of our community portal. So they get to work together and talk about their deals and learn from each other. And they know that they're around people that are like them. So one of the things that the lesson of thinking I was alone in 2008, like a lot of us did, I realized, you know what, a lot of people are out there thinking they're alone investing, and they kind of have the I might be crazy thing going on. And so this is a really cool way for us to build this community where we brought people together, and now they know, wow, there's a lot of people like me that think like me, and it's very empowering. So eQRP has become a community where people are growing and finding fulfillment. And that's really what this turned into. In the beginning, it was just, I got to get people some better information. And now there's thousands of people in a really cool community that are thriving together.
Yeah. And for those that don't know what eQRP stands for, can you just give a short explanation on that?
Yeah, it's an enhanced qualified retirement plan. So it's a type of 401k that gives you all this power and control and protections that's different than self-directed IRAs or solo 401ks. It gives you more, it gives you privacy, it gives you power and control. You get to hold assets. One of the things that most people don't realize is self-directed IRAs do not let you hold assets yourself. You cannot do it. You have to have a custodian. And with an eQRP, you get to be that person. It's called a trustee. And so it's very cool that you can control and be, as long as you're a good fiduciary, meaning you got to be a good steward of those assets, you get to control them. You don't have to have mommy or daddy, meaning a custodian, babysitting you. You actually get to be in charge.
So how did you come up with your next idea, which is Frame Tech? Like give us the background on Frame Tech.
It's funny. Frame Tech showed up through some connections, people I've known for decades, and it was the right thing at the right time. And it's 2.5 years ago when my partner and I decided that we were going to be a part of it. And basically some guys came to us and said, we have this great idea, but we need about $40 million to do it. And we said, all right, this idea is pretty cool. It seems like crazy, but we really like you guys and we think you're the right people. It's all about the execution of the team. And so we said, we're willing to bet there. And so we brought the community together and it said, we have this incredible idea. We're all in on it. And it went from this idea to disrupt the construction industry and solve the housing crisis to a manufacturing plant that's going online September of 2024, which is this month that we're recording this. And so basically this idea was, we've got a massive gap in the market where there's millions of missing homes and apartment units, and there's not enough people that want to frame them. And there's no innovation. Basically the nail hammer or the nail gun from 70 years ago was the last thing. And these guys said, we have this idea that would make the process 4 times faster. So instead of framing a house in a couple of months, it takes us 2 weeks, the entire process. And instead of having just dumpsters full of wood and waste, we reduce the waste by 99%. And then we have a quality control building, all the floors and the walls and the trusses inside of a plant where it's 10 times better quality. So we've changed the whole system and really not had an incremental change, but an exponential improvement across the board so that we can frame the houses that need to be framed to get people housing units. Because right now there's no expansion in this space. It's very, very minor. And this is an idea that's scalable and it's big enough to where it actually can help to solve this in a major, very significant way. So that Frame Tech really is the housing crisis solver that is disrupting the construction industry and has really the whole industry paying attention. It's funny because a couple of years ago, people were like looking at us like we were crazy and there's no way these guys are going to be able to accomplish what they're saying they can. And now that things are online and they're being tested and we're producing, it's the narrative has shifted, but you have to be willing to be a little crazy. And it's also not something you do your first round. I've had 70 plus businesses that I've started, run. Many of them, more than half, didn't go anywhere. They were just a great learning opportunity. So I think that's one of the things that people have to understand. It doesn't mean if you have the perfect formula, it's going to work the first time. You may not be ready and you may need to learn some things. And quite frankly, you have to be willing to say, I'm going to be obsessed and go all in and then nothing works. That's part of the process of getting to the one thing. I forget who said it. May have been Grant, may have been Cardone, or one of these guys. And the thing they said that stuck with me was, you only have to have one thing work. You don't need to have 10 out of 10. If you have one thing work, and it might take you 5 or 10 or 20 years, whatever, that doesn't matter. The important thing is to pick something. It doesn't matter if it's even the right thing. Pick something and go for it. And eventually you're going to get to that thing. You just can't quit. The only way you lose is if you quit.
That is actually a quote that I don't even know whoever said it. I've been saying that for years. The only way you lose is if you quit. And that goes all the way back to 2007, 2008. And ultimately, for people like you and I that are out here telling the world publicly about our failures in order to educate others, and hopefully they can avoid some of the mistakes we made. The reality is, you've written all kinds of books. You've been speaking and teaching for many, many years. And yet people don't always listen, right? Like, and to a certain degree, they need to make some mistakes. It's almost like, my opinion on raising kids is just like raising entrepreneurs. If you do everything for them and you protect them from every possible thing that can hurt them, they're not going to appreciate it and they're not going to learn. Like, they've got to get some lumps. They've got to take some hits.
I don't think there's any way around that. It's sad. I watched that. I don't have kids, but I was a kid, and I do know that it was very valuable to have my parents tell me no and have me push back and go create. the thing that really makes me sad is so many parents think that their job is to protect our kids from pain. It's not. Their job is to make them independent. And part of that is to have the hardening skills of going through childhood where you don't die, but you do experience pain and you know you can get through it. I think we've got a generation of very soft humans that are wanting to go crawl back into the womb in a lot of ways. And that's not going to be good for these people as young adults. Ultimately, they're going to be very soft. And so it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. You have to understand when you're going out there that it's not a straight line, and it's not without you running into walls. You're going to trip, you're going to fall, you're going to stub your toe, you're going to bleed. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be painful, and it's the most fulfilling thing ever. So it's a question of your resiliency, your ability to endure unbelievable amounts of pain. I'm probably making this sound really sexy to go become an entrepreneur, but the reality is it's kind of like I've done martial arts for 2.5 decades, and you go in there and you learn. In the beginning, I was like, man, if I get hit, I'm going to start crying because I don't like being hit. I hate it. And then you get to a point where it's just part of the process, and you learn how to absorb a punch or take a punch. And that may seem psycho, but when you realize that the world is going to be punching you your entire life, that's how things work, that it's not some la la land. It's like there's actually a harsh reality to it. And when you learn how to take that without crawling into a corner and sucking your thumb, it actually is very freeing because you realize, wow, this isn't going to kill me. And I can go right through this thing, and I'll learn with each of these lumps and bumps. I'm going to get stronger and better and clearer and more focused.
Okay, so as we're recording this, you talked about skydiving earlier, and you talked about other things, right? So my daughter's turning 18 in September, and by the time this show comes out, this will already have happened. But I'm taking her skydiving for her 18th birthday. I used to skydive when I was younger, and I loved it. But the other thing that we talk about, the negativity and taking lumps and bumps. I own bucking bulls, rodeo bucking bulls. And I've never been on one. And so this year I had a goal. I'm 48 years old. I've dropped a bunch of weight. I got back in decent physical condition. And so a week from Friday of the week that we're recording this, I am going to Oklahoma where my bulls live and are trained, and I'm getting on a bull. And everybody that I tell about this, the first thing they ask is, aren't you afraid of getting hurt? That's the first thing they ask. And the second thing they say is, make sure you video it, because everybody wants to see me get hurt. But nobody thinks about the fact that just the fact that I'm getting on is reaching a goal of mine. I don't care what the outcome is. I have no intentions or no desires, I should say, to get hurt or die. However, this has been a goal of mine, but it's interesting how the negativity always comes out first. And then again, the glory of seeing me get stomped on or take a hooking, I don't get it. But I know this is just another step in the journey. And regardless of the outcome, I'll have that memory for life, assuming I'm not, in a coma or gone. So.
Well, there's that. I love the idea here, and it makes me think about going to the gym or a lot of things where the win is saying yes and taking action of some sort, and then you trust the process. And the process is ultimately, for my experience, is the process ends up being a lot of great stories, and then it's very fulfilling to be in it. But it's not about the outcome. This is the same in sales or investing or anything. If you own the drivers, if you own the actions, like showing up and doing that ride or whatever it is that matters, that's when I hear people saying, I can't wait for this, when this happens for me, like I make the money, or I look at them and I shake my head. I'm like, you're missing the entire point of this life. That's anybody that's 70, 80, 90 years old is going to tell you the opposite. Don't wait for that thing until you're happy. There was a singer named Nightbird that passed away, and she was amazing. She was on, I think it was America's Got Talent or one of those shows with Simon, and she made a comment that was incredibly beautiful about you don't want to wait until things aren't hard to be happy. And I hear people saying that, and it's a great reminder that your job is to be happy in the process of taking that step and then letting go. And it's really beautiful when we can do that, because then we actually experience our life in the presence of it versus forward projecting and having anxiety about what the future might hold, or whether it may or may not be exactly the way we see it.
Well, in the other lesson, and I heard you say it earlier, you talked about your mentors advised you to do certain things and you chose to do others. That's no different than me going and jumping on a bucking bull. I'm not going to some, backyard farmer who has a bull in his pasture. I'm literally going to a place where the man that takes care of our animals, trains our animals, is a former professional bull rider who has won the national finals rodeo. He's won the PBR finals. He's qualified. He's one of the best of the best. And the lesson is, you've done this for your entire career. I've done it for my career. We fall, we get thrown off, but we go and seek out the best of the best people we can to learn from and to hitch our wagon to, so to speak. And that makes, when, not if, but when you get your ass kicked, that makes it easier to get up, dust yourself off, and get back into business. And I didn't have that in 2007. I didn't have a network. The first 5 years of my career, I dropped the ball. I didn't know anything about this kind of stuff. And now I preach it all the time. You don't have to have the answers. You just have to have people in your network that do.
I think that's it. It's because all the answers are out there. I mean, whether it's people or there's resources we can find. The only question is, are you willing to take the step and keep taking a step and stay focused and have something bigger than yourself? If you've got that, then, and you're willing to hold that vision, there's really nothing that can stop you. And the worst case scenario maybe for some people is, well, what if it kills me? I'm like, well, you're going to be fine because you'll be dead. Like, it literally isn't going to matter. But you worrying about you dying, because look, we're all going to die. The exact moment in time is really not up to you. So I think that it's an irrational waste of time for us to be thinking about that potential outcome. And if it's not going to kill you, you're just going to learn, or you're going to win. But the reality is you're just not. This idea of losing, it's kind of a silly thing. Every time I've learned something because something failed, if you will, it was this incredible gift. And quite frankly, those are the best lessons. It's not that when you win, that's not when you learn something. You truly learn from the pain, and that's what burns into you. It's like the first time you get rejected when you're asking whether you're trying to do a deal or you're trying to get a date. Like that rejection, you're like, okay, I'm going to get better. I'm going to get sexier. I'm going to make a better offer. I'm going to have more capital. Like whatever it is, there's an emotional charge that helps you. Whereas if you win, it's very fleeting and it's very shallow.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable, because you and I both know people that got into the real estate industry or any business in the last 5 years as the markets kept going up and up and up. And you and I and many people listening to this, and if you're one of the people that are this way listening to this, shame on you. But ultimately, they think their shit doesn't stink because everything they touched made money. Well, let's see what happens as the markets turn and they shift. And that's where the cream rises to the top. And that is capitalism. That is supply and demand. We need that. I crave it. I've been looking so forward to interest rates going up for so long, and everybody says you're crazy. No, because for my business model, I'm not reliant on what the banks are charging for interest. So I have opportunities that I learned over the years of making mistakes that my competition, in air quotes, they don't understand. They've never been through it. So
I couldn't agree with you more, man. Exactly spot on. And everybody should listen to that last minute or two over and over again.
Yeah, man, it's fun. It is fun when you're in the right position and you've taken the lumps. But you've got, I believe, some books and videos accessible to the listeners. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, turnkey retirement is this idea of finding a way for people to really kind of take the whole idea of financial freedom, boil it down, and start understanding what you need to do. People get overwhelmed. I mean, it's easy to get overwhelmed because it's like, what do I start with? Where do I go? What do I need to know? And so turnkey retirement is the umbrella for the community with all the people that are involved in the eQRP community. And really what I've done is I've taken the stuff that I've learned through experience. One of the things that I put on there you can download, and you've got the link for that, is all the things you need to look at in a deal. I built this framework. It was like the 19 landmines that are out there. It's the things that you should make sure you know and should avoid. And things like, understanding the people you're investing with, how much money do they have in the deal, who's in the deal, who's got experience. There's all these literally 19 different things. And what I've noticed is that many people invest in deals and they haven't even looked at 19, let alone 9 of these things. They just go, that's cute. I'm going to go invest in cute. And that's a great way to lose all your money. So the idea here is that I'm giving you're getting to leverage 25 years of my experiences, losing tens of millions of dollars and making hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's in terms of the financial model, it's also understanding what the process is in the course. All that stuff is available. So you go there, and it's my gift to you guys to go and download it.
That's awesome. We appreciate it. And everybody can go to thegenerationsofwealth.com/turnkey, and you'll get linked over to Damion's information. Damion, I asked this question of a lot of my guests. What is something I should have asked you that I did not? And it does not have to be related to anything that we've been talking about.
I always love the question, if you were going to go back 25 years, what do you wish somebody had told you? And the funny part is, I think about that and I'm like, well, if they told me X, I probably would have ignored it. And so I laughed, because sometimes you're just not ready to hear it. I think one of the things that I wish somebody would have told me is, one, always have somebody that's balder, wiser, grayer, with at least 10 to 20 years beyond you of experience, ideally more, because they have cycles and they can calm you down, and fail faster. Like, it's really interesting how people try to avoid. They want everything perfect. They want all the lights to be green before they leave the garage, and then they're still in the garage 20 years later, and they go, "What happened? Life, it just went by." So those two things are things that I realized that 20 years ago, the things I failed, that I was concerned people would judge me. Those people don't even know who I am. Like, there's such a funny disconnect, or they don't remember those things. And I think that that's part of our training as kids, where we're taught don't fail. If you get 60%, you're literally almost an F student. And if you get less than 50, or in that, you're a total flunky. The reality is, in life, if you can get half right, hell, if you can get 1 out of 10 really right, you're a billionaire. And so we have to get really, really clear on those things. We're taught the opposite. And so I would and the mentors, again, not only do they help keep things calm, they give you perspective. When you think the world's falling apart and things aren't going as fast as you want, it's a really useful lesson to have somebody say, okay, you've literally been doing this for 5 days. This took me 17 years. So maybe give it another week or 2 or a month, or that perspective, and trusting somebody, I think, is one of the most valuable things that everybody should do. And I say should very specifically. I don't like shooting on people very much, but everybody should have somebody that's wiser, that they're paying attention to, that they trust, that will tell them the truth.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, not that this is anything that led up to pitching this, but the REI Circle of Trust, which is a mastermind that I run, that's exactly what it is. It is a peer-to-peer mastermind of people telling the blunt truth as we see it. If you take the advice, that's up to you. But when you sit in a house of your peers for several days, immersed for 24/7, there's shit's going to come out. And, it changed my life. That's why I'm so passionate about it now. So, Damion, I really appreciate your time. I look forward to crossing paths with you in person again, hopefully soon. It's like I said, it's been a minute, but thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with the Generations of Wealth.
Happy to be here. It's good to see you again, Derek. Thanks so much.
All right. And for everybody else, wraps up another episode. Check us out everywhere you find your local podcasts, and please like, share, give us all the love. Spread the Generations of Wealth show to all of your friends and family. And until the next one, go out, live your vision, love your life. See ya.
Thank you for joining us on another insightful episode of Generations of Wealth. May your newfound knowledge help you in leveling up your own strategies to get through the many obstacles to your money-making processes and bring you much closer to the financially secure life you truly deserve. Continue filling up your accounts and further polish your financial tactics by listening to more episodes of the podcast at thegenerationsofwealth.com. Because in your wealth building journey, there is no other way to go but up, giving you the chance to finally live your vision, love your life. That's all for now. See you on the next one.